I just believed so much in what we were doing, and I've loved funeral service my whole life, and I could see what needed to happen. And I said, I know we can get there. And I'd hit my knees, and we would just decide to keep going. But it seemed like it was always at the end of the year, everybody'd want to get together and talk about folding the tent, as Harris said, and I just kept pushing forward. And here we are, still here.
That was the voice of Bob Arrington, a legend of the Jackson business community. Bob has fought through adversity from day one, with the funeral home having nearly closed a few times. Bob stuck it out and has even started a venture in the tech space recently. Welcome to 40 by 45, the West Tennessee Business Podcast, sponsored by Tennessee Industrial Printing. Bob, welcome to 40 by 45. We are sitting in possibly the oddest location for the show.
I could see that.
So far, we've got your nice display wall of some caskets behind us. But Bob, thank you for having us to the funeral home today.
Thanks for asking.
So, Bob, when did you know that you wanted to go into funeral work?
Well, I'll tell this story a lot. It's when I was 7, and people will go like 7. I said, yeah. When my grandfather died. No, my grandmother died in 1963. We were living in Milan, and my daddy was in insurance. I'm a first-generation funeral director, as they call it. My 2-door down neighbor, Ralph Jones, owned the funeral home. And that's really the first time I had been exposed to it. But there was something about that I could either see as a 7-year-old. Of course, we knew him. He was like family. I grew up with his kids and in and out of the house, so it was like family helping. So my elementary school was across the street from the funeral home. So I'd leave elementary school at 7 years old, go across the street, stay at the funeral home a couple hours, ride home with Ralph. Saturdays, I'd want to go to the funeral home. So I don't know what triggered it. But when I found out later on, my mother told me when I was 9, she went to a child psychologist. And she said, I've got this 9-year-old that all he wants to do is hang around this funeral home. That psychologist said, don't worry about that, Francis. He'll grow out of all that. He'll grow out of all that. Well, here we are 62 years later, and I'm still at it.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things, I don't know, it triggered me, and I've been in and around it my whole life. I was out of it for a little bit. I moved to Jackson, went to worked through high school, went to mortuary school, got out of mortuary school, and then I ended up in business with my dad in insurance for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I missed funeral service the whole time.
Yeah.
I missed it the whole time.
Now, a lot of times I think in life we look back and there's like certain people that kind of change the course of our lives, and it seems like Ralph Jones was that for that. So when you were 8, 9 years old, hanging around the funeral home, what were you doing?
Well, I would go at the front door of the funeral home. They were just like ours. They were swinging glass doors. And you'd come up a sidewalk, and you'd walk up about 5 or 6 steps and come into the funeral home. Well, what I would do is when the person hit the first step, I would try to open that door, and then I'd run around in front of it and push it open. So I was at the front door just opening doors. I was carrying flowers, then, if they weren't too big. I was carrying flowers. Then I'd ride in the hearse, and I'd be going to the cemetery looking over the dashboard. But I was just kind of hanging out.
Yeah.
Just learning and being around.
And I'm guessing Ralph was excited about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now, I don't know anything about Ralph. Was Ralph around to see the genesis of this?
No. Ralph died. Well, I take that back. We had moved he hadn't seen the funeral home. We had moved to Jackson, and he knew I was working at a funeral home there. But he died before I actually built the funeral home.
Yeah. Now, not taking into account the business side of this, the fact that you own the business, so like you benefit from it doing well. What is it about funeral service that motivates you?
It's a ministry. I mean, it is when people trust you at their worst time with their most valuable asset of spouse, mother, father, brother, sister. And by helping those people Now we don't bury the dead. That's not why people call us. We do that, or we cremate. But they call us to help them down a grief journey, because their life will never, ever, ever be the same again. So that's what people call on funeral homes for. When I lay my head down at night, I feel pretty good about myself most days, because when you've helped somebody go into something that they don't know what they don't know, they're walking off in a space, because normally a family will handle a funeral service every 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, it's not their.
It's not
used to
their
it.
routine.
Yeah.
So by being able to serve people, and I've always kind of been in that mode, and it may have come because I was 7 years old and I was watching Ralph and John serve people.
Yeah. Well, and opening the door is a great way of serving
That's
people.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As much as you can do as a
But
7-year-old,
that's
right?
exactly right. So it's just kind of was instilled in me of serving, and I've kind of done that both in the community and in funeral service and my association. I've given back. I was president of the National Funeral Directors Association, which I'm the only Tennessean to have ever done that. Chairman of the Funeral Service Foundation, which gives back. So it's the servant piece and the satisfaction and the trust that people put in you.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Now, most people are probably not very familiar with the funeral business because, like you said, it's like every 7-8 years.
Yeah.
If they're lucky, it's only every 7-8
That's right.
years.
That's right.
It's almost like having to go to the doctor. Like, I enjoy every time I get to see you when I come to a funeral, but it's like I'm at a funeral, so that's part's sad.
Exactly.
A lot of people might go to a restaurant and feel like they can run a restaurant because, like, I think a lot of people are more familiar with the concept of restaurant. What would people be surprised about as opposed to the familiarity that they don't have with the funeral business? What would they be surprised about this industry?
The hours that it takes.
Okay.
Because what people see is they'll come to a visitation, maybe an hour or two, and a 30 or 40-minute funeral, and then at the cemetery. So they may see 3 or 4 hours. But, there's about 60 hours involved from the time you get a call, like we got 2 last night, from the time you get a call and we start what we do until we finish at the cemetery. Most of the time it's 2, 3, 4 days, and you're working many hours through that process to coordinate to make all that happen. So it's what they don't see that happens before the funeral and after the funeral is what people, I think, would be most surprised at.
Interesting. You had mentioned that you'd moved to Jackson. Your dad was in insurance, and you were getting into you ended up back in the funeral business here in Jackson. When you were thinking about starting this business, which I think is in 1995, right? What was the landscape of the funeral home business like here in Jackson?
Well, you had, of course, you had George A. Smith and Sons and Lawrence Sorensen. Those were the two, as we call them, the white firms. And then you had Mercer Brothers, Stevenson Shaw, Bledsoe, that served the African American market.
And that's there was a pretty clear
And
division
it's
there.
still pretty clear.
Yeah.
Now, we will do some African American funerals, but you're talking very, very few, because we've got good African American funeral homes. Now, they're beginning to blend, because they're blending in churches, which used to years ago did not. So you're beginning to see a little more blend because of relationships.
Yeah.
So, but that does happen. But the majority is still segregated. So you had 2 firms downtown, and all the growth was north. And so when I missed funeral service, our offices, I worked for Smith, and our offices were behind the funeral home. So I'd still go over there and visit and drink coffee. But with all the growth north, funeral homes are downtown in older buildings. I said, I'd like to get back in funeral service and build a funeral home that's built for a funeral home in the north part of town where the people live.
Because most of them were built in old residential houses, right?
Exactly. They were all older houses that you'd maybe add on to a little bit, but basically they were older houses because people lived upstairs. And that's just the way funeral service was.
Yeah.
Families lived upstairs and the funeral home was downstairs. So we moved out here in 95 and we built it and nobody came.
Yeah. Well, and before we get into that,
Yeah.
what was the moment that you're like, instead of going to work for someone else, you're like, I'm going to start my own funeral home from scratch?
Well, there were some things that I wanted to do differently that was not being done at that time. And I knew that if I was going to do that, I needed to do it on my own and not do it for someone else, because if I went to work for someone else, we were going to be doing it like they were doing it.
Yeah.
And I knew there was some things that I felt needed to be provided to this community, and the only way to do that was just do it.
Yeah. So what were some of those things that you wanted to do differently?
Well, basically have a building that was all on one level.
Yeah, because stairs are a problem.
That was spacious, that had some really good audio and video equipment, a children's lounge, a place for children to come, because kids want to be a part and they want grandkids around. But, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, they're in an unfamiliar place and they're going to be hard to keep still.
And there's all sorts of people they don't know talking to them.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there was those. I wanted a different environment for making casket selections, a bigger parking lot, a unique culture of service. I mean, we tried valet parking, and I just wanted to take it to another level. And I knew the only way to do that was just do it ourselves.
Tennessee Industrial Printing is West Tennessee's commercial printer. They have built their reputation on delivering on time, on budget, and on target. Tennessee Industrial Printing delivers on complex printing projects, mailing projects, and fulfillment services. With a fleet of presses, they have positioned themselves to handle small and large volume jobs. I have been able to work with tips with many of my clients' projects, and they have delivered every time. Wayne and his team have continuously invested to ensure they have an efficient and effective option for commercial printing. Start your next project at tipsprints.com. Now, you have been in the same location since 1995.
Right.
Now, when you moved out here on University Parkway, there wasn't much out here, right?
There wasn't anything out here.
Not even the post. Was the post office here?
No.
No, not even the post office. So this was just like flat land.
Oh, yeah. We wouldn't see 6 cars a week.
Yeah. So knowing that, why were you like, this is the spot?
Well, when I decided I wanted to do it, I started looking for land. Okay. I didn't want to be on Highland. Because I didn't want to pull out with a funeral procession onto Highland.
Okay.
I wanted to be somewhat off of Highland to be able to get the funeral procession somewhat in stable line before we got to Highland.
Yeah.
So I started looking, and so I found this, and I found out that Jimmy Wallace and Jimmy Harris and Milton Cravens owned this piece of property, or this whole section. So I went and talked to them, and then I found out Jimmy Harris was a funeral director. So we became partners to start this project. But that's how I found this, is because I didn't want to be on Highland.
Yeah.
The only thing out here was Ben Livesey's veterinary clinic was 3 or 4 lots up. And Charlie Rhodes had his brick little strip center over here. And that was it.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
So it was really that experience that you already had that was said you don't want to pull onto Highland.
Right.
Even though the visibility would have been awesome.
Oh, absolutely. I just knew logistically that wouldn't be the best.
Has University Parkway gotten to a point where it's too busy?
It really hadn't.
Yeah.
We just put a man out in the street to block the traffic now. Yeah. So we just learned by doing.
You had mentioned that you started with business partners with Jimmy and Milton.
Yeah.
Having not been in business for yourself before, what was it like taking partners on right at the beginning?
Well, it was kind of different. But again, I didn't know any different.
Oh, yeah.
I'd been in business with my dad, but my dad owned it, and
Yeah.
I was beginning to own it with him. But starting something extremely, extremely fresh. I mean, we didn't have a paperclip. I mean, when you started, we started, and we all kind of did it together. So it was kind of learn as you go. But I leaned on them a lot, and they would ask a lot of questions, and I would tell them, well, you can't do funeral service that way. And so we all kind of learned together.
Yeah. Well, and you had this great new building. You had kind of a new style of service that you brought to market. And, I bet business was slammed from day one, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, like I say, the first 12 months we did 10. And, and I had a $13,000 note payment. So I wasn't real good at it, but I knew that wasn't going to last.
Yeah.
So we ended up taking on some other partners. So the first offering we did was we took on 25 partners because we needed to pay the bank off.
Yeah.
So I had to more or less give it up to save it.
Well, and why do you think it was unsuccessful at the start?
Well, here's what I found out, because I started asking people. I go
Yeah.
like, why do y'all go to Smith or Lawrence Sorensen or wherever?
Sure.
And I would be asking people my age, like the kids, the children. And they go, well, that's just where we've always gone. I
Yeah.
said, so it's not location, facility, service, or price.
Tradition.
They go, I don't know why we go.
Yeah.
That's just why we go. So then I realized it's going to be hard to get people to make a change and come to us when they don't know why they're going, where they're going. It's like getting people to change churches. That's just where I've been going. So by looking back, the Lord knew what he was doing, because had they lined up out here like McDonald's, we wouldn't have been given near the service that we had to give in those first 5 years to establish ourselves as something different. So it was all purposeful. It was painful, but it was purposeful. And it's made us better 30 years later for what we went through the first 5.
Mayor Jimmy Harris talked about that early struggle.
I would guess Bob's business opened about 95. Is it? We opened the doors, but nobody came. and we were having to fund operations, and we had bought cars and you name it. And it just wasn't happening. I mean, we didn't. I mean, we'd have a funeral here and a funeral there, but nothing to the extent of what we needed. It became evident that we had to do something, or we're going to have to fold the tent. We basically sold shares in the company, and we sold those shares to, lots of different people, and they were a part owner of the business, and then so that got the heat off of us. Then,
Former Mayor Harris is mentioning that you started selling shares to exist, really. How did you feel about selling your business away a chunk at a time?
Well, it was one of those things you just had to do. I had to give it up to save it.
Yeah.
At that time, I owned 60%, and those guys, Gary Carter and Mike Steele, was in that mix. They owned 40%. So I just had to give it up to save it. So as we did that, I ended up with 10%. And we all diluted our ownership to be able to raise the money to pay off the bank.
Yeah. How do you sell partners on something that's not going well?
Well, here's what happened. Wallace was starting the Bank of Jackson at the same time. And so he and I would go out and meet with people, and we were trying to sell shares in the bank with a business plan in the bank, and then we were trying to sell shares in the funeral home that was going broke. Now, that was 2 different sales to the same people, but it was 2 local businesses, and people would buy in both. They believed in our mission. They believed in local ownership of a funeral home 30 years ago. They understood what the mission was of a higher quality of service and a higher quality building and a very easy location where the people were. It all made sense, but it was all relational. We knew the people we were going to. They knew of what the bank was going to do and what the funeral home was going to do. So it was all relational and trust.
Now, you've brought in 20 some odd partners at this point.
25 at that
and you're
point.
down to 10% of ownership. Does it start going forward from there? Start going well?
Well, it starts leveling off. It kept our nose above the water line. But then as we needed some additional capital to keep hanging on, because in 2000, 5 years later, which we're doing a little better, we brought Charles Rahm into the picture. And Charles had been in funeral service in Jackson for 20 years. And I knew we needed he was a high quality funeral director, still is, grew up in Jackson, well known. So, well, let me back up. In 97, we put in a crematory. We spent another $100,000, but we knew going forward that's what it was. That's where it was headed.
Yeah.
So then we bring Charles on. So we needed capital to continue to grow and serve. So we sold another 25 shares. So at one point, I got 51 at the time investors.
And you went down to what percentage of?
Well, I went down to like 5% at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah.
So, but that was able to help level us off until we started getting business in years
Actually
5 or
started to
6.
hit
Exactly.
your growth trajectory.
Yeah.
What finally changed that you think that allowed you to finally hit that growth trajectory?
You know, it was probably in about year 7 or 8 when we started getting what I'll say continual steady business. We were getting 8, 9, 10 a month. It wasn't like a 10, then none. That it started getting level, and then as it just continually, and ever since, it's grown every year.
Yeah.
I think it was just the stability of people knowing we were going to be here.
Yeah.
Because the whole community knew we were struggling.
Yeah.
Because I'd have people, I remember Dr. Jett, God love him, every time I'd see him, he'd say, Bob, every time I drive by here, I pray for you. And I think we had a lot of folks doing that. A lot of folks wanted us to do well because they saw what we were doing.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Ralph Mercer, told me one time, he said, Bobby Joe, he said, you got a really, really good business. They just not dead yet. So as I told Ralph, I said, but to that point, he was making a point. You've got a really good reputation that you do things really well. They just hadn't needed you yet.
Yeah.
So I think it just took that time of 7, 8, 9 years before people realized that we were doing something different.
Well, and to your point, if people kind of knew that things weren't going great at the beginning, it's a little bit like a bank. You wouldn't go to a bank that you thought something was not going well at, right?
That's right.
You want to be able to trust and know that these people are going to be, they're not going to go out of business with mama's body in the back
That's
of the
exactly
building,
right.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly right.
Now you're down to 5%. You got 50 plus partners. Was it a challenge working with all those people?
Yeah. Yeah, we had a partner meeting once a year, had to by bylaws. We had a board of directors that met once a month. Dr. Barefoot was chairman of that board, and Harris was on there, and Frank Lawrence, and Bob Campbell, and we had some Hot Elkins, Jerry Griggs. We had some really, really good, diverse investors, and we met once a month. The partners met once a year, but I'd get some of them that'd call and tell me, here's what you ought to do, and they meant well, but some of them I'm not sure had even been to a funeral, much less been involved in running one. But they all did very, very well by wanting to help us succeed.
Yeah.
Now, when we decided and we were able to buy all the partners out,
Yeah.
some of them were not real happy because some of them wanted to stay in because they knew it was going to do well.
Yeah.
But the majority of the group agreed to sell to a new company that was able to get me my ownership back, and now I've got 80%. And when the new company was formed, there was 6 of us.
Oh, okay. So you didn't buy back you didn't go to Bob Campbell individually and say, I want to buy your shares back and do it over time. You formed a new corporation with 6
Bought them
people.
all at one time.
Interesting. Okay.
And we had a partners meeting, and overwhelmingly 80% of them, or 85%, voted to sell to the new company.
Gotcha.
And I had a couple, Ken Brassfield, I had a couple of those guys that said, Bob, you don't owe me anything. Here, it's yours. You have it back. I did it to help you. But we formed a new company of 6 people that bought all 52 of those out, and we wrote 50 individual checks from the new company.
Yeah.
And now that 6 is down to 3. With me and Mike Steele, who's the accountant, who was one of the original guys back 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And Charles Rahm, who's the general manager here.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah.
So essentially is you twice you almost had to close the doors.
3 times.
3 times. 3 times.
And it was always at Christmas.
Oh,
Those
okay.
conversations would always come up at the end of the year.
You almost had to fold the tent to steal Jimmy Harris's phrase.
That's right. That's right.
Why didn't you? Because I mean, I've had bad times in my business, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, the stress is overwhelming. You got people you got to write paychecks to.
That's
and
right.
you've done it 3 times. Why did you not shut up the doors?
That's really a good question. My wife has asked me that a lot, but it was, I just believed so much in what we were doing, and I've loved funeral service my whole life, and I could see what needed to happen. And I said, I know we can get there. And I'd hit my knees, and we would just decide to keep going. But it seemed like it was always at the end of the year, everybody'd want to get together and talk about folding the tent, as Harris said, and I just kept pushing forward. And here we are, still here.
Jimmy also had this to say about your approach to business.
Well, Bob's a good promoter, and he knows a lot of people, and he was constantly within the community and visible in the community. And the other thing is, the the funeral home business today is totally different than it was in 1973 when I was in the funeral home business.
Okay.
It's a different kind of service. It's a different offering of services. And, in looking at some of the things Arrington does today as a funeral home, I thought, I wonder why we weren't doing that back in the 70s. I mean, to me, this is just me, but one of the things I think that Arrington has is a personal touch with every family, and he gets to know the family, but he gets to know the person that's died. As the 7, 8 years I was in that business, I think we had maybe 2 cremations, and today I think cremations is 40+% of his business.
So some of those ideas that Jimmy talked about are things that we've already talked about, your service and stuff like that. But how many crematories were in Jackson when you installed your crematory?
None.
Yeah.
And we're still the only one. So when we put that in 97, like I say, we opened in 95 and weren't doing anything. But I had gotten involved in research. National Funeral Directors was a big resource for me. And I knew cremation was coming because it was in California, and we know everything out there is going to end up here.
About 10 years afterwards.
That's exactly right. So I put a crematory in because I knew it was coming, and I wanted to be able to serve any and every family, start to finish, and not have to take them somewhere, that they stayed in our care. And I wanted us to have a full service funeral home with a crematory once cremation came to West Tennessee, that we would already be here. So what I did is I called these other funeral homes around about doing their trade cremations, their third-party cremations, because for 2 years we took our cremations to Nashville.
Oh,
that was the closest trade
Yeah.
crematory we had, was in Nashville. So I called around and I figured it up. I needed 60 trade cremations a year to pay for our $97,000 investment back there. So I got around and I got up to about 70. I'd say, how many cremations you do? Well, we did 3 or 5 or 8, whatever. And I got up to 70, so I quit. First 12 months, we did 120. I like to faint it. I could not believe 120 trade cremations in rural West Tennessee. And I'm talking about Bradford and Dyer and Milan and Humboldt. And it went up every year. Well, it got to the point we were doing 300 of those. And I couldn't do them anymore because it was the funeral home had begun to grow, and then 300 additional cremations. So we just decided we just can't do trade cremation. We can do ours for our family because it was growing. So we gave everybody we were doing cremations for 6 months notice, and just say, hey, we were going to have to add people and add another cooler, and we just couldn't do it. It grew so much.
Yeah.
So, but we did it just to be ready when our families wanted cremation.
ATA is a leading advisory, tax, and accounting firm. From tax planning and client accounting services to advisory and assurance, ATA has got you covered with locations throughout West Tennessee and the Southeast. They have an expert nearby to support you. Let's amplify your business together. Contact the ATA team today at ata.net. You might not know that I started my educational journey at a community college right after high school, which allowed me to have some time to make decisions for my future and save a lot of money on gen ed classes. Jackson State Community College provides that opportunity and many others for students in West Tennessee. Visit jscc.edu to see all their educational and career building opportunities. Wow. And then the other thing that I know we talked about off camera was aftercare.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me what is aftercare for a funeral home?
Yeah, what it is we've noticed that, as I said, we do bury the dead, but we mainly work with people on their grief journey. And a lot of times, their hardest times is when everything kind of goes back to life. The family goes back home, the cards, the flowers, and the food stops. And all of a sudden, life is happening. So what we do for a year, longer if needed, but mainly our program is for a year, we stay in touch with those families. Chuck Maxwell, who was at Northbrook Church, is our aftercare minister. So he texts people, we send them resource material, we stay in touch with them. Many times they'll just, Chuck, I really need somebody to talk to. And Chuck will meet them for coffee or just visit. And then if it gets into really complicated grief, we'll put them in touch with a professional. Mm-hmm. But Chuck can have those as a minister, have those aftercare conversations that, no, you're normal. You're not crazy because you just start crying one day. That's okay. Mm-hmm. As I tell people, it takes some time, some talk, and some tears. And everybody's on their own timeline. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will say, man, you ought to be over that by now. Well, no. Nobody knows grief. Grief is as deep as somebody loved, and nobody knows how deep somebody loved. So grief takes on a whole new dimension in each and every single person, and we just give that ear to help them walk through that.
You mentioned Chuck, and Chuck's, I think, a retired pastor.
He is.
And you have a couple of those. How many people do you have working here?
Well, we've got 8 or 9 full-time, and then about 4 part-time. Part-time, a lot of funeral service people have that because the schedule is so varied.
Yeah.
A lot of second career people will be part-time at a funeral home. We've got Doug Walker. He's a retired pastor. And then Todd Brady, he works full-time. He's a funeral assistant and handles all of our pre-need planning. And then Chuck. So we've got 3 ministers on staff just for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
We're just a good service heart. We're faith-based. Everybody here is believers, and people can tell it. And so we continue that. And with Chuck and Todd and Doug here, every Thursday morning, Chuck has a devotional. We call it Words of Wisdom. So it helps keep us on the right track and grounded as to what we're really here for.
Yeah. Now, in 2007, you had a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
How did that change your business and your approach to life?
In 2007, we owned 2 cemeteries here, Howell Memorial Gardens and Ridgecrest, and we had bought Covington Funeral Home and Memorial Gardens in Covington. Those guys, I really am buying that with my heart instead of my head. Those guys went through, David and Jonathan, they went through the exact same thing I did. They built it, an extremely nice facility, 20 acres, cemetery, but they too were having trouble getting out of the gate. It was about to go to the north door of the courthouse, so to speak. So we went over there and bought that and started trying to turn that around. And now this is 2000, when did I buy that? That was in like 2004 or 5, and we're just now kind of getting some traction over here. So we were beginning to help that a little bit and increase some sales in the cemetery. But then it started having some downtime, and it started to bring the mothership down. So we sold that. But anyway, so I had the heart attack. So that's when I saw, well, sometimes bigger's not always better. So in 2008, the next year is when I sold Covington and sold the 2 cemeteries here because the funeral home had grown and I just got some things off my plate. But it changed my whole vision of I was going to grow and buy other funeral homes in the
Sure.
area because there was a lot of them didn't have a succession plan.
Yeah.
But it helped me kind of to understand and go, hold it, boy.
Yeah. Yeah, because like a second ago, you were talking about the volume of crematory
Yeah.
work that you're doing. I'm like, my brain instantly goes to opening a dedicated crematory facility for that sort of thing. But you've pared back
I have.
to really focus on mostly on the funeral home.
That's right, serving families. Because what it was doing, the trade cremations was taken away because I'd have to spend time there, or the staff would, or I'd have to go to Covington, or there'd be an issue at the cemetery. And so it was kind of splitting up our vision, and our main mission was to build this funeral home to serve families better.
Yeah.
And that was beginning to infringe on that. So we just dispersed some of that stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. Now you talked about you started that new corporation to buy out all the.
Mm-hmm.
You ended up with a couple of people, and including Charles, who's active in the business. How did you decide who was going to be in that second corporation out of all those people that you're like, these are the people that I'm going to ride with?
Well, mainly as I talked to some of them were just ready to, okay, we've helped you get started. That was our mission, is to help you get started. Steele was one I talked to because he was the accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been there since we put dirt in the ground. So he knew it financially, beginning to end. And then Charles, being the manager,
Yeah.
was actively in the business. So everybody else, as I talk to, they go, yeah, that's good. That's good. Now, we had a couple of other guys, Mike Tankersley and Ted Nelson, and then we ended up buying them out. But mainly it was the 50 group.
Yeah.
They all pretty much, like I say, there was 2 or 3 that didn't want to get out.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority of the group said, yeah, it's time to move on.
Yeah. When you drive around, you'll see a funeral home, and there'll be like a corporate name on the funeral home. And so, and a lot of them used to be locally owned, but are getting sold out to big corporations. That hasn't happened in Arrington.
Mm-mm.
Why is that?
Well, because we are so local. We are so local. Now, I'll say this. It's becoming somewhat kind of like next door, the Bank of Jackson, selling to Centennial. Sometimes operating as a single entity becomes a challenge in anything, not just funeral service or banking or, it's just a challenge. So sometimes to grow, I see corporations that come in. The public corporations, they operate a little differently than the private one. There's a lot of folks around, especially up in the Northeast. There's a guy, Jimmy Altmeyer, he owns like 50. And then there's a guy out in the Midwest that owns like 30. So there's a lot of that, and that's how Service Corporation International started. That's the biggest, they own 1,800. But Mr. Waltrip, back in the late 60s, started buying funeral homes just to share expenses and people and vehicles and those kind of things. But we're still, as we are, locally owned, and hope to maintain always a privately owned environment and not a Wall Street environment.
Yeah. So you've pared back several businesses, but you still have a couple other things that you're working on. Corporate funeral providers is a kind of a niche business. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and again, that started, 95, about 97, 96, 97, right after we had first opened. I was trying to figure out a way, once I was having these conversations, as to why people were going other places. I was involved in the chamber at the time, and I knew that people were coming to town, going to businesses. $10 an hour at the time was $10 an hour, whether they were working at Delta Faucet, Procter & Gamble, or wherever. They were going because of the benefits package. So I said, I need to somehow get my name in the benefits package. So I, with Homesteaders Life Insurance Company, we developed the only where you can pre-fund your funeral and final expenses through payroll deduction. We filed it as a group product. So as a result, it's just like health insurance. Group health is less than individual. Well, group funeral funding is less than individual. So, and then it ended up growing. But homesteaders made the comment to me. He said, Bob, if it works in Jackson, it probably works somewhere else. Employees are employees.
Yeah.
But it was all done to try to help build this place. So I've done that, and that's kind of pared down a little bit because the leadership changed at Homesteaders, and they've gone a totally different direction in death care. And so, but it was done strictly to help promote this place.
Yeah, but took on a life of its own.
It took a life of its own.
And then recently I've seen you have a new company called Obituary Share.
Yeah. Again, that one was started to help serve our families. Roy Heatherly, who was a publisher of the Jackson Sun here, he and I became friends when he was here, and then Gannett moved him to Wichita to run the Wichita Eagle.
But he's in Louisiana now.
Now he's in Louisiana running the chamber, which he just retired from.
Oh, okay.
Actually.
Congratulations.
The end of February. So Roy's in Wichita, and he calls me one day, and he said, Bob, how you getting your obituaries out with the newspapers tanking? I said, well, putting them on the website, doing a little Facebook. Long story short, we talked, and a guy named Danny Licata, who was at the Jackson Sun, went with Roy to Wichita. He was his IT guy. So they came to town, and we talked for a couple of days, and we created a way that we could take an obituary on our Facebook page and put money behind it and promote it out and drive all that traffic to the website. Because I didn't know, but you post something on Facebook, it doesn't go anywhere. So we started actually promoting and putting money behind it, and it has driven. Well, we're having about 100,000 visits a month to our website, which is unheard
That's a lot of
in
visits.
funeral service.
Yeah.
So again, and we're now working with excess of 100 funeral homes right now with some of those corporate guys you talk to that are interested in testing. So, but the whole thing started to help serve our families.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, all funeral homes want to do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and I own a marketing business.
Yeah.
I've run Facebook ads for a lot of different things. Running some on an obituary never crossed my mind.
Understand.
When it comes to keeping your home comfortable and safe, trust the team that's been serving West Tennessee since 1999, Tim Ferguson Plumbing, Air, and Electric. With locations in Jackson and Memphis, Tim Ferguson offers complete home solutions for heating and cooling, indoor air quality, plumbing, whole home generators, and electrical. Their highly trained technicians are ready for any project, big or small. When you work with Tim Ferguson, you will always get honest, upfront pricing and financing options to fit your budget. From the team at Tim Ferguson, we are here when you need us. Keep your home running right with Tim Ferguson Plumbing, Air, and Electric. Visit timfergusonplumbing.com to schedule your service today. Haven Insurance Partners is a locally owned independent insurance agency. Haven takes your risks, whether personal, commercial, health, or life, and approaches many different insurance companies on your behalf. This allows them to find different coverages and price points for you. At Haven, they believe you deserve options, and they want to help you explore those. Visit haveninsurance.com to find better coverage today. So you've almost kind of got a tech startup now. How do you become a tech founder at your age, Bob?
Well, you're not the first person to ask me that. I was in a conference a couple of weeks ago, and somebody said, "Man, what, are you in the tech business at 70 years old?" I said, "Well, accidentally." I said, "The whole thing was I was just trying to serve a family. That's all it was." But, you know better than me, social media is where it is. That's where they're going to get it. And families will come in now and say, "Now, Bob, you're going to do for Daddy what you did for Uncle Jimmy on social media." And I go, "Yeah, that's just how we do it."
Yeah.
And now it's just built in every family we do. That used to, the families would pay for it like they did a newspaper notice.
Yeah.
Some people wanted it in the newspaper, some didn't. So we were doing it that way. But since families are enjoying the condolences that people are sending, the flowers and the notices that they're getting from people they hadn't heard from in 5 or 6 years.
Because of that reach.
Because of that reach.
Yeah.
We send it to the audience that would have an interest in the death.
Yeah.
So we just do it for everybody now.
What are you learning in this new, because you're probably just learning a whole different way of doing business.
Absolutely.
What are you learning in that business that's changing the way you're doing the funeral business?
serving families better and thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is even what Jimmy Harris said, that we get to know families. Well, now that we will send it to an audience of, like, we find out from the son, okay, well, what do you do? Well, I work at a bank in Lexington. Well, we send it to that audience. And daughter, what do you do? Well, I teach in Bartlett. I've been teaching. Well, we send it to schools in Bartlett. So it's helped us learn families more.
Yeah.
Because in our mind, we're sitting there going, okay, so who do we need to send this death out to?
Yeah.
Where used to, we would sit, get information about the deceased, put a newspaper notice in the Jackson Sun, and be done.
Well, and also the society has changed so much.
Absolutely.
Where, like, when the newspapers were very strong, most of the time your family all lived in that area, right? And now that everybody's so dispersed, you've essentially fixed the problem that was created by newspapers dying.
Exactly right.
Interesting.
And so when families are getting a whole lot more interaction on the website, they're getting more flower acknowledgments. So it's opened up a whole new way for families to get support from people that the newspaper never offered.
Yeah. Now, you spent a lot of time working on doing things differently than other people. Are you far enough ahead of everybody else and your reputation strong enough that you don't need to innovate anymore? Or are you still focusing on that?
No, I'm still focusing on that.
Yeah.
Any and everything I can do. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I'll still try and think through, and no, I'm going to always figure a way to continue to try to improve serving families.
Yeah. We're going to enter into our lightning round. So what's a business book that you'd recommend to an entrepreneur, Bob?
The one I'm reading right now is Unreasonable Hospitality.
This is the third time this season that this book comes up.
Well, I'm just telling you, and then I don't have to tell you, but you know, that guy that's taken that restaurant and done what he's done, and he's turned service into hospitality. And what helped me understand it, when he said service is black and white and hospitality is technicolor, that's kind of where I'm trying to get to. And you know, I'm talking with people of saying, okay, instead of us being in funeral service, we're going to be in funeral hospitality. That it becomes a culture and people are guests and not customers. So that's the one I'm reading right now.
That's a great one.
It is a good one.
When are you having, this is a weird question to ask a funeral director, when are you having the most fun in business?
When I'm improving and thinking and brainstorming and trying things, and families make a comment about, thank you for doing that, we never thought about that. But just trying to, I was taught by Mr. George A. Smith himself that, you know, you do things and don't ever let them see you do it, and let them wonder how you did it. So I have the most fun coming up with things to do for families.
If you had to start over again tomorrow, what would you do?
Woo! I would make sure I had enough funds. I'd make sure that going into it, I had a couple of years of money. I don't know. I've had this conversation with myself a lot. Would I build the facility that I built? But the facility I built is what's helped build the business in later. Would I build it and then add on to it? But I wouldn't shy away from doing the same service we're doing. I might have controlled the expenses a little better on the front end.
How do you, delegating is challenging for entrepreneurs. What has allowed you to, or how have you built the trust with your team to be like, I'm gonna give you this, I'm gonna walk away?
Well, it's like my motto going into 2026, because people would say, man, Arrington, when you gonna retire? I go, well, I don't really want to be retired. I just don't want to be required. So with staff, Charles been here 20 years, 25 years now. Sarah and Roger, our other staff, been here 4 or 5 years. Mike's been here 5 years. So they've been around me enough to know they know how I think. They know what the quality is, what the expectation is. So I've gotten comfortable with them, which makes me a little more comfortable with me.
What do you think the future of the funeral business looks like, or the funeral industry looks like?
That's a real challenge. Obviously, cremation is, you know, it's like Mayor Harris said, you know, when we first had the crematory, you know, we were at 5-10%. Now as of today, we're at 48%. Mississippi's the lowest. They're now at 32%. So cremation is real. The future lies that funeral directors have to offer families the cremation options of having a funeral. I don't have any problem with cremation whatsoever. Obviously, we put a crematory in.
Yeah.
But people need to have service. And we try to tell people, just pause. You don't have to do it here. You don't have to pay me. Just pause as a family and celebrate those 86 years and 3 kids and 15 grandkids. You can do it in your backyard, but at least pause.
Because crematory, when someone's cremated, you see people maybe wanting to skip the whole service part.
That's right. And it's been proven they're the ones that have the biggest grief challenge, because they'll wake up in a couple of weeks and, I think my mother died. So, and we'll have 70% of our people that have cremation has a service.
Yeah.
Half of those will have the body present and then go to the crematory. That way they can have the traditional, the family wants that closure.
Yeah.
The deceased may have wanted cremation, so they're able to do both.
Yeah.
Go through the traditional service with a cremation.
Does a cremation lead to a lower revenue for a funeral?
It does, yeah. Cremation is about half, maybe, or maybe 60% of a traditional burial, because you don't have to have cemetery property. You don't have to have a marker.
You don't have to sell one of these.
You don't have to. Yeah, there's a casket that's a rental, literally. And the cremation container is inside that, and it comes out, and that's what goes to the crematory.
Yeah.
But it's basically about half the cost.
Yeah.
As a traditional burial.
So that would affect the way you guys have to do business in the future too.
Exactly.
All right, Bob. $1 million question. What do you hope your legacy is going to be?
He served well. Whatever that is, whether it be families, community, family, he served well. That's really what I feel like my mission is, why I was put here, is to serve in some capacity.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for the time and sharing your story with us.
Thank you for letting me.
Thank you. I'm glad. I didn't know all that when we started, so I was really glad to learn so much of that today.
Well, good. Thanks for asking. But yeah, I've been blessed. Been some challenges, as we all have, but I've been blessed and been able to do something that I've loved since I was 7 years old.
Thank you for listening to 40 by 45, the West Tennessee Business Podcast. The best way to support the show is to tell others about it. The more downloads we get, the more likely we are to continue telling these stories. This series is produced by Adelsberger Marketing, recorded and edited by Jacob Beals, branding by Katie Howerton, motion graphics by Ricky Santos, and produced and hosted by me, Kevin Adelsberger. Special thanks to Eric Archer, who helped create Season 1 and set us on this course. If you're interested in creating a podcast for your business, connect with us at adelsbergermarketing.com. Thank you for listening.